Well, welcome. We really appreciate you coming to our website to learn more about strategic planning. And what I wanted to do, I know on our site we've given some additional information about, example slides and kind of how we approach this. What we wanted to do is give you all a little more of a deeper cut at what this looks like in practice, what the best practices look like, what some of the key outputs look like. That's what we're gonna kind of do with our time today. Let me start. It's gonna be about a 10 to 15 minute presentation. Let me start with a little bit about our firm. So we've been in business for about a decade now. Formerly, I was at McKinsey, and Redwood's been around for almost a decade. The number one thing that we most commonly do is strategic planning. We also do organizational design work. We do some go-to-market work and for sales and marketing functions. But the number one thing that we do is strategic planning. And what we really love to do is help enterprise kind of high growth companies who want strategic clarity and an organization perfectly designed to deliver on it. We've been really lucky. We work with some really amazing companies. You can kind of see at the bottom of this slide some of our clients that we've worked with in the past that are even working with currently. And there's obviously a lot of other clients that we can't list on this page. So this is something we're really passionate about. We've worked with pretty large, medium-sized, high-growth companies across various industries. And so we can bring that perspective to bear as we kind of talk about best practices. So the first thing is I want to talk a little bit about when we talk about strategic planning. One thing that we've learned, having done this so many times, is that a lot of times people get a bit myopic about strategic planning, and by that I mean, if you look at this page, people get really fixated on some version of what we call phase two, or kind of the value creation planning part of this. One of the big takeaways I want to leave with you, if you're starting to think about doing something like this, you're wondering who to get some help from to do it, is really having a bit of a more holistic perspective. And we like to think about these kind of three different phases. Phase one is what we call strategic context, which is really understanding what is going on in the markets in which you play. What are the markets you're in? How big are they? Are they growing? What are the competitors? What are the competitors doing? That's a really important thing. A lot of times we'll work with companies that maybe did some version of a value creation plan or strategic plan, but they didn't really do a lot of that kind of like, hey, let's step back, let's do some thinking and understand what's going on. And we have learned that it's really, really important to do that if you're doing a really kind of fulsome long-term strategic plan. So don't forget phase one. That's really important. Phase two, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today, is the core of this. It's the value creation planning. It's the core of the strategic plan. What are our top priorities? How big are they? What is the size of each of those? What's our ability to execute on each of those? Where will that get us if we look over the next 3 to 4 years? What's the value of that? So that's that second one, is value creation planning. And then phase three, which is again something that people really forget, is when you have a plan, that does not create value in and of itself. It doesn't create any value. It's just a plan. It's very, very important when you're doing the planning to think through, hey, how do we convert this strategy into action? How do we create this into value creating actions in the company? And there's a variety of things you can sort of see listed on this page about what goes into that. But do you have a really good governance system of meetings and agendas and roles? Do you have KPIs you're tracking on a consistent basis, milestones that you're tracking? Do you have the dashboards in place? Do you have initiative? Do you have plans for your most important objectives about, hey, look, what are the key milestones here? How long is this going to take? Do you know who you need to go hire? There's some hiring gaps. But figuring out, hey, I've got a strategy. Now, how do you mobilize around it? How do you mobilize and focus on actually creating action to make this happen is really important. So we want to start with that. Before we walk into the meat and potato of this, I want to make sure if you have more questions, if you want to dig deeper, that you have the ability to reach out to us. So I've got our company's email on this page. It's inquiries@rwadvisors.com. If you want access to a full-length webinar, hour-long webinar on this topic, you can email us. We actually have that. We do webinars for people in our network. So if you'd like access to that, feel free to reach out. If you want to talk more and get into some details of what's going on in your company, feel free to reach out. We want to make sure that you have access, and feel free to reach out. We're happy to talk. So I want to talk about going back. We were talking about the three phases. So phase one is what we call strategic context. What goes into strategic context? So we have these 5 illustrative areas that we really encourage people to think about. And when we're doing products, we like to think about with our clients. One is just, what are the market forces at play, right? What's going on in your market that might really shape the long-term trajectory of the size of the market, winners, losers, et cetera. So this can be like technology, like artificial intelligence. It could be onshoring or nearshoring, if that's part of your business. It could be digitization. It could be the market's kind of bifurcating, to like a very low cost kind of dollar store and a Whole Foods premium, with the middle being hollowed out. It depends on what market you're talking about, but understanding, hey, what's at play here is really important. Market analysis, really understanding your markets. What are they? How big are they? How much are they growing? What's driving them? Critical if you want to do really good strategic planning. Customer overviews, understanding your customers. Competitor insights. A lot of our competitor clients, sometimes I think people go overboard on analyzing their competitors, but a lot of times the most common thing we see is that there's almost a naivete around their competitors. We don't even know what they're offering. We don't know what they're charging. We don't know what they're doing that's interesting. You can learn a lot from your competitors. So when we work with clients to do strategic planning, we encourage, hey, let's take a look, right? Because there's a lot you can learn. With all of that, you can start doing market positioning. Where are we in this market? What's our strengths? What's our weaknesses? What's our shares, right? What's differentiating us? This all is a key input into the next phase 2, the value creation planning. Now, let me talk a bit about, just give you some examples of when we talk about certain of these components, what do we talk about? So we look at market analysis. So left-hand side this is a very kind of high-level overview. We do some analysis. We say, look, you're in a $38.8 billion market, okay? 27 billion of that might be out of scope, maybe because of geography, customer segmentation, right? Depends on the client, but this is illustrative. That leaves 11.8. So about a $12 billion market that you're playing in. And here are the segments that constitute that market. So we decompose that. That's the left side. One thing we really like to do is actually at that more granular segment level, looking at what is the growth rates. A lot of people stop at, hey, my market's growing at 5%, or in this case, 9% aggregate. A lot of times when you look at the segments, there's actually variation across segments in terms of their growth rates. So in this example, we have one segment A is growing at 3% versus segment B at 9% and segment C at 10%. In aggregate, it's 9%. But what's really important to understand here is you have one segment that's almost doubling over the next 5 years through 2029. That's segment B. Segment C is not far behind. And then the segment A is, growing, but not, basically at GDP. So really understanding that is really important as you think strategically about, hey, where should we be focusing our time and attention and money? These types of insights can be really important. I want to talk about, that's a bit of an example of phase 1. Let's talk about phase 2, the value creation kind of planning type stuff. So we like to start this type of thinking. I encourage people to, the key, I think, is really getting into the details, but it's always helpful to have a hypothesis to kind of orient you. So one tool that we love is this. It's from A.G. Lafley, who's a former CEO at Procter & Gamble, I think originally conceived of this. And it's really, really a really cool tool. And it's basically, here are these 3 questions, and you answer these questions, and it gives you a rough sense of what your strategy is. And you answer these 3 questions. 1, what is your winning aspiration? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? 2, where do you want to play? And where do you not want to play? And 3, how are you going to win? Which is sort of a synonym for comparative advantage. Really having a hypothesis for those 3 questions is a really great way to start a strategic planning process of saying, hey, look, at a high level, what do we think these key dimensions are, right? And that'll help give us some definition as we do the rest. One thing we almost always do, and I really encourage people to do if they can, is developing a framework to understand the opportunities your company has to grow. A lot of strategic planning sees at a very high level, very conceptual level, and it's not very actionable. So we've been working and thinking about this for a very long time. And one thing that we think is incredibly helpful is to identify, hey, look, what's your universe of initiatives? What are the universe of growth opportunities your company has? Let's lay those out in kind of a mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive way because that is actually that sets us up to have something that's very actionable moving forward. So in this example, which is an illustrative example, we thought through, okay, there's market penetration initiatives. How do we kind of grow share? M&A, which is another mechanism to do that. New offers, is there new stuff we want to offer? Pricing is a separate lever. That's on the revenue side. And then margin, is there gross margin stuff we can do? And is there SG&A stuff that we can do? That is a kind of a nice, clean, me-see way of breaking up your opportunities, and is a really nice lead-in into the meat and potatoes of value creation planning, at least the way we like to do it. So once you have your list of initiatives, a key thing is to say, okay, what are each of these worth? So when we're working with clients, we'll actually build a mini business case, working with various stakeholders to kind of size these out to say, look, how big are these and what's the relative value of these initiatives? So that's one really, really key dimension, is saying, look, you've identified the list of initiatives, like, now how much are they worth? And then what we like to do is combine that with an ability to execute assessment, which is another kind of qualitative assessment. And when you take those two together, you get a really, really, really compelling output, which is you've got your value on the y-axis, you've got ability to execute on the x-axis, and that lets you kind of see, look, what's high value and also relatively high ability to execute. And so in this example, you've got three that really pop out: large M&A, e-commerce expansion, and expand the product portfolio. Those might be the three most important strategic initiatives coming out of this planning process for this kind of illustrative company. Once you've got that, we really like to kind of do this in a very kind of detailed analytical way. And so if you've done the process in the way that we like to do it, you get some really powerful outputs that come out of this that are very, very helpful to kind of articulate, hey, here's where we're going. So one thing we like to do is saying, hey, look, from a financial perspective, how is this going to play out? And so for this illustrative example, we've got a client around $75 million of EBITDA. We think they're going to grow about $40 million over the period of investigation, from that kind of 9% organic growth. So they have a path to $115 million, which is fantastic. Now, coming out of this process, we identified these three additional top priority strategic opportunities: the large M&A, e-com, and product portfolio. That gives them a path to $172 million of EBITDA, which will be an 18% compound growth rate, which is more than double because you're compounding. So a huge opportunity set that's been identified as part of this project. These then become the key things a company needs to focus on moving forward. One key thing, because I want to talk a little bit about that phase 3, which is about mobilization, because I think that's probably the thing that most companies overlook the most. When we do this work, you've identified, hey, look, here are our top opportunities. One thing that we think is really important is saying, okay, who owns this stuff, right? If there's not a clear owner, it's probably not going to get done. And so coming out of the exercise, you'll say, look, here's our top priorities, here's our top priority initiatives. And then you can sort of identify, some areas we've got a really clear owner. So for example, large M&A, the owner might be Janet, and she's this because she's a CEO. But the responsible person is going to be Vanessa, who's the chief development officer. But we might have something else like e-com expansion. Let's assume this company maybe has no e-commerce or has a very little e-commerce. So we don't think the person currently running it really has the skill set to do what we need him to do. We don't have a great owner for that particular initiative. That is a really helpful output that comes out of this process, identifying, okay, look, here are some things that, we got to figure out how to staff it. So coming out of the strategic planning process, you actually get really, really crisp about hiring and organizational design. So again, just an example of how when you do this really well, it can be very, very impactful. So that's a little bit of a preview of how we like to think about this and the work that we like to do. If you have questions or follow-ups, or you just want to connect, we love this work. This is what we do. Feel free to reach out to us. inquiries@rwadvisors.com. Feel free to reach out. We have access to longer webinars on this. So if that's what you'd like, a little bit of a deeper cut, we can get you access to that, and we would be excited to connect with you. Thank you so much.